Do you have any idea how fast I am? I'm fast as fuck, boy!
No, 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 oh, no, no, don't do it! No.
This is the Kamov Ka-50 Black Shark, and by this point you are likely quite familiar with it. After all, an entire major patch was named after this vehicle, and it certainly has been causing quite the stir in the community since its release. It is of course a tier 6 premium helicopter for the Russians, currently sitting at a BR of 10.0, with the only higher helicopter on the Russian line being the Mi-28N at tier 7 BR 10.3. Now, despite being listed as a tier 6 helicopter, this certainly has the same sort of power level as a tier 7, with the only major technical drawback of the Ka-50 being its lack of thermal vision, something of which is only really a major pain during night battles. During daytime battles, a keen-eyed player will have no issues spotting and killing enemy targets. Now, the flight performance is certainly not lacking, with the Ka-50 having a speed and agility which is on par with majority of higher BR helicopters, with only a few outperforming it, such as the Lynx and the Eurocopter Tiger series. One thing to note though is that when your rotor RPM or your collective pitch are relatively low, the Ka-50 will begin to drift off in the yaw axis due to its coaxial rotor system, which means that it lacks a tail rotor. Due to this, the heli will drift off a bit in the yaw axis, especially when at low speeds, such as when you're landing. This can simply be fixed by just upping your collective pitch a little bit. In terms of weapons, the Black Shark has a fair few loadouts, most of which are centralized around the 9K127 Vikir missile, of which you can carry up to 12 of. This is a weapon of which can be used for both air-to-air or air-to-ground, firstly having 1000mm of best effective penetration with just over 5 kilograms of TNT equivalent explosive. That will certainly be enough to penetrate and also cause a fair amount of damage to most ground targets that you might encounter. This missile can be fired from a range of 10 kilometers, of which makes it the second longest range heli-mounted missile in-game, with only the AGM-12B Bullpup on the H-34 having a longer range of 11 kilometers. Now, the Vikir's maximum speed is 600 meters per second, meaning that it will travel to its maximum range within about 17 to 18 seconds, depending on how quickly it accelerates, after which it will of course airburst. Now, as briefly mentioned a minute ago, the Vikir can be used for air-to-air, in which it employs the use of a proximity fuse, meaning that you don't even need a direct hit to down an enemy air target, making it quite the potent weapon in this role. Especially against slower targets such as helicopters, it will be quite deadly, something of which becomes blatantly obvious as soon as you go into a helicopter battles game and see just how many kills most of these Ka-50s can get. Now, the Vikir can actually lock onto enemy targets. In-game, it essentially just tracks the silhouette of the target, and against slow or stationary targets, this will be relatively accurate. But against faster moving targets, it can lag behind a little bit, so personally I prefer to manually guide the missile in most cases, just so I can lead it into the target correctly to ensure that I get a hit. Other weapons on the Ka-50 consist of the standard dual 23mm cannon pods, S8KO unguided rockets, Igla air-to-air missiles, and also 250 or 500 kilogram dumb bombs. It is worth noting that the bombs have very limited use, but the cannon pods and the S8KO unguided rocket pods can be mounted alongside the 12 Vikir loadout, but the Iglas will take away some of those Vikir ATGMs. The Black Shark also has a fixed gun, a 30mm 2A42 cannon, of which can have up to 100mm of best effective pen, and is actually the same gun that is mounted on the BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicle. Additional features of the Ka-50 consist of night vision, a radar warning receiver system, and flares, of which are your only counter against air-to-air missiles. The Black Shark has 3 individual camouflage options: the standard tricolour camouflage, the black camouflage, and then also the Black Shark pre-order bonus scheme. And of course, the vehicle can be played in either ground RB or simulator, and then of course also in helicopter battles. During this video, we will be looking at helicopter battles and ground RB, starting off with some helicopter battles. So getting into the mode, we are of course spawning in at one of my team's many helicopter pads. Of course, if you play this mode, you will know that it is a very big map. You have many different spawn points, and over the course of usually a 1 to 2 hour long session, you will have to capture various zones, destroy various ground targets, and overall those points will be given or taken and will lead to either a victory or defeat. Now initially I take off and spot two Mi-24 Hinds going past my spawn, so I decide to engage them. I obviously don't want them to reach the friendly ground targets, so I fire a missile at one of them, manually guide it. Proximity fuse does its work, knocking off the tail boom of that first Mi-24. Fire the second one, I try to get a lock, goes a bit weird as that heli is very close to the ground, but I then manually guide it, and I believe I get a direct hit and actually knock off one of their wings, damage their helicopter, and then they go down, giving me a second kill. And you will find actually that when you're moving along, the locking system can get a bit iffy near the ground, mainly just because, at least in-game, it appears to work by locking onto the silhouette of the enemy target. And of course, close to the ground, there's a lot of clutter, there's a lot of other things it could confuse it for, and that can make locking relatively difficult. Take out an AH-1G, Huey's coming in, and I don't even use the scope, I just look at the enemy target. And really, since you don't need a direct hit, you can do that. You can just look at the enemy target from the third-person view, fire the missile, and just sort of eyeball it and try and get it close enough for the proxy fuse to do what it needs to do, which of course, there it did. Now unfortunately, as I'm flying along, my engine is failing. As you will see, my RPM is very low at this point. And, you know, that's not exactly good, because that means you begin to fall out of the sky, which, you know, it would appear you don't want. And then, of course, over this, just out of that sort of canyon, comes up multiple enemy helis. A Tiger fires a missile, hits me while I'm on the ground. But luckily, one of my pylons is still intact, and I'm able to, on the ground, fire off one of the Vickers and knock out the Tiger, essentially becoming a surface-to-air missile launcher. Now, of course, killing enemy helicopters is going to be the best way to gain SL and RP in helicopter battles, and likely also the best way to ensure that your team gets a victory, but ground pounding is also an option. As you can see, I'm not carrying any of the gun pods or the S8KO unguided rockets, although you can bring them along if you wish to have some extra capability. But that gun that you have, the 2A42 cannon, 30mm, 100mm of best effective pen on the ground target belts, they can destroy medium tanks, pillboxes, so if you just take that gun with the ground target rounds, you can save some weight, only take the 12 Vickers, and have very good air-to-air capability, as well as air-to-ground capability with your 30mm cannon. Now that more or less covers it for Heli EC, not a huge amount of detail to go into, and I'm sure this is the mode that most people are less interested in, so with that said, let's go and take a look at ground RB battles. So of course, to start, I am spawning in at the friendly airfield, and then beginning to make my way towards the actual battlefield in the centre of the map. Being at a 10.0 BR, it is likely that you will be facing surface-to-air missiles, but since majority of those systems are at a 10.3 BR, there is a likelihood that occasionally you may not see any of them, which can certainly be a nice break when you are playing this helicopter. First kill on a Challenger 2, a lot of these tanks are hiding behind the trees, but I can just catch glimpses of them to get a rough idea of where the vehicle is, so I can get a solid hit with the ATGM. If you did have thermal vision, that would be very useful in a situation like this, but it certainly isn't a major limiting factor in this game. I already know where some of these vehicles are, another hit there and another Challenger 2 taken out, and then I know that there's another tank just behind those trees, so I fire off a missile, and, you know, luckily for me, this hit sets him on fire, meaning that now the fire, I can see the smoke, so I can roughly guess where the sort of centre of the crew compartment is to get a final blow on that enemy Leclerc. Now, if you have seen any of my other heli reviews, you do know that I commonly say that, of course, your main focus in this mode is on taking down enemy ground units, but you should be equally looking out for and aiming to kill enemy air units, especially helicopters, of which, with their anti-tank guided missiles, will also be posing a major threat to your ground units. So, taking them out can also be very useful, and I happen to spot a Eurocopter Tiger. He is stationary, he's just hovering there, so there's no need to manually guide the missile. I can literally just lock it onto the enemy target, let it go, and, you know, then you would just hope that it would go close enough for the proxy, which in this case it definitely will, considering that he is not moving, and that will knock him down relatively easily, and you know then that that is one less enemy vehicle for your ground team to worry about. Now, as you can see in this game, I am carrying all 12 of the Vickers that I can possibly have, instead of sacrificing 6 of them for 2 of the Igla air-to-air missiles, and this can leave you somewhat vulnerable against faster flying aircraft, as you can see with this Hunter FGA-9. I fired the Vakir and I did get a critical, but it was not quite enough to take him down fully. If I had the Igla, it would likely have got a direct hit and knocked out that air target before he could have killed me. Getting into our next ground game, I head in towards the battlefield, as you do, and I spot an enemy helicopter. A Bo 105 seems to have been a bit sneaky, got behind my friendly ground forces, something of which I highly doubt they want to be worrying about, so I fire off a missile, and not quite a direct hit, but it is very close, enough to knock off his gear, set him on fire, do pretty critical damage. And since he's not quite dead, I do fire off a second missile just to ensure that I get that kill before any teammate can go and take that from me. First kill there. Then we have some ground units, an OF-40. Direct hit to the front, knocks out the gunner as well as the engine, so he can't move, he can't shoot. He drops smoke. A Leopard 1 drives into him and therefore slows down, allowing me to get a hit on him as well. And then the OF-40 dies due to being on fire from my ATGM hit, and the Leopard then J's out, giving me a nice little double kill there to start off my game. Moving on from that though, I come across some anti-aircraft vehicles. Of course, you do have a radar warning receiver system that will let you know as soon as someone locks onto you, as that automatic just has, and you can see it's beeping relatively loudly. It's a pretty blatant warning, but I hit him in the face. Gunner out, commander out, cannon breach out. He's going to have to repair that. And of course, I also see a Gepard, German SPAA. He's not looking at me, and I would prefer to keep it that way, which is why I fire a Vakir at his turret, direct hit to the side of the vehicle, and that is him down. I then try and fire another off at the Otto. I can just see him behind that rock. Unfortunately, I just clip the rock, and that missile misses. And while he's still repairing, I decide to take the time to fire a missile off at this Leopard 2A4. Direct it to the side, but unfortunately it only does some damage to the track. I therefore then decide to focus back onto the Otto, and I see his devilish eyes looking at me from behind the rock. And, fire the missile off, aim just a bit higher than I did last time, hit the top of the turret, and that is him taken down. 2 SPAAs removed from the battlefield, which definitely does make my day a little bit easier. I then come across a Leopard 2K who is heading towards my friendly ground spawn. Again, another thing that I doubt that my team on the ground want to be worrying about. Solid hit to the turret, and that is my final ground kill of this game. I do though then fire at another Leopard 2, hit the back of the turret. Looks like I set off his ammunition rack, but the blowout panels appear to save him in that situation. The final kill of this game was on a Focke-Wulf 190 who snuck up on me quite well. Fired some shots at me, and luckily didn't kill me, allowing me to unleash the full power of my ground target belts upon him with my 30mm cannon, luckily damaging his tail enough that he then went down, giving me an air kill, and certainly showing though how even with the ground target belts on in a ground battles game, even if you're out of your missiles and you only have that 30mm, you can somewhat rely on that to protect you to a certain extent. Now after that, I did fly around for a bit longer, and it later turned out that that Focke-Wulf 190 did actually damage the drive shaft for the rotors, which wore down over a few minutes, and then eventually I lost all my power and I crashed. I then spawned into my T-80B, of which I do use as a backup for the Ka-50, or the other way around, with the Ka-50 being a backup for the T-80B, of course, which is also a 10.0 vehicle, and we did win that game. So overall, a pretty decent result, and I also made 99,000 silver lions from that game, definitely demonstrating how the Ka-50 can be used to make a decent SL income in both ground battles and of course also in Heli EC, where the income for premium helis in that mode is decent anyway. This thing will make quite a lot of SL in the hundreds of thousands per game if you can nab yourself a few kills. Of course, the Ka-50 is available on the Gaijin Net store for €49.99, and I think it is fair to say that it is certainly worth your money when compared to the value of other premium helicopters. Whether it should have been a premium or not is certainly up for debate, but I'll keep my personal opinion on that quiet for now. I do own this heli myself, I did not have it on test drive, and I got it with Gaijin coin from an event, so I didn't actually put my own money into it. I earned some coins from a previous event by selling an event vehicle, and I bought it with that. Nonetheless though, I do very much enjoy playing it, and I don't think I wasted those Gaijin coins, as it has given me a very nice SL income. as, you know, I did already own all of the Russian helis, and the Mi-28, I ground that out before I properly started playing the Ka-50, so I've not really ground out any vehicles with it, although then again, if you're buying it to grind the Russian helis, that would be another reason to get it. It is one of those guilty pleasure kind of vehicles. If you're having like a boring day, you can just go and do some heli EC or some ground battles in this, and it's fairly likely that you will have some fun, and you will make a nice income while you're doing it. Nonetheless though, that is it for me. Thank you very much for watching. If you do have any thoughts or any questions about the Ka-50, do drop them in the comments below and I will do my best to give a decent response. If you did enjoy watching, please consider dropping a like on the video, maybe even subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.